All right, thanks guys for coming back. This is the Q&A session for the One More Thing conference in 2013. It is 2013, yeah. It's been a long day. My name is Peter. This section of the show is brought to you by offscreenmag.com. We've got a couple of magazines to give away, as well as a couple of t-shirts to give away from the conference itself. We've got one more speaker coming down. Yep. Anyway, a couple actually. I'm terrible. That's what those empty chairs would be, I guess. Anyway, so we've got a couple of t-shirts and magazines to give away for the first couple of questions that are asked. We have two Jameses on either side of the auditorium. There's one. Okay, fair enough. We've got a Ben now. Ben is replacing James. You probably didn't need to know that, but let's keep moving on. So if you've got any questions, please raise your hand, either Ben or James. Okay, Ben, this is up to you. Start running, son. All right. Excellent.
It's actually a question for Scott, so I'm glad he raced in quickly and sat down. With the devices coming out now, things like Google Glass, et cetera, how do you think that's going to impact the types of work that you've done at places like Mona or the zoo, et cetera? Like, how do you sort of see the future of those kind of wearables playing into the work that you're doing currently in that sort of time and space movement directional stuff?
For now, not very much. We've been talking about ways that we could potentially use Google Glass for sure. I think the biggest thing for us that's probably going to change in the next sort of 12 months in terms of the short term would probably be the opening up of internal location through APIs. I mean, Google I/O just announced that in Maps API version 2, they're actually going to allow for submitting and getting that information yourself. The accuracy I think they're getting at the moment is kind of like 5 meters, which is pretty good, just using Wi-Fi and accelerometer data. In the short term, that's probably much more important to what we're doing and how we're going to be, and in terms of what everyone else can do as well. To do something bigger, it'll probably just depend on finding someone to fund it, to be honest. The stuff that we're looking at doing over the next sort of 12 months anyway, I don't see any of that stuff coming out, but potentially forward, I mean, Google Glass I for sure see as being like a much better way of doing what we're doing. Instead of even having to look down here, you can still enjoy the works and just call up the information when you want it. You can use image recognition to pull up that stuff for you. Yeah, I think it'll be huge.
And Griff is taking this next question.
Just a quick question for Lex. In terms of pitching and so forth, is there what's the craziest pitch someone's pitched you, and can you go too far? And also a second question is probably a bit more general with in terms of the way the app store is developing at this stage, pretty much exponentially. Does anyone kind of scared in terms of where it's going at the moment, in terms of, because there's everyone and their dog trying to develop an app, where do people see that going? So probably 2 questions there.
So in terms of craziest pitch, and can you go too far? The answer to the second part is yes. And the first part is, I don't recall the nuttiest, let's say offhand, but the crappiest ones that we deal with, and we deal with them all the time, and I'll bet I'll have one today or tomorrow because of a bridge collapse in Seattle, Washington, back in the US, but is the people who try to capitalize on horrific incidents to promote their apps. So it's hey, if you saw after the Boston Marathon, runners are probably trying to think of alternate routes. Check out Find My Running Path for iPhone. And we get, that's not the actual name of the app, but we get those after every major catastrophe that the world faces. And so, yeah, that's going too far. We've had people who think it'll be funny to try to play up things like sexism or racism, and they think they're doing it maybe, I don't know, postmodern, ironically, something, and it doesn't ever work. The other thing that I will say, don't try, or if you're going to try it, really try to make sure you're not sucking at it, is folks who read my timeline on Twitter, let's say, and then try to, based on something I just tweeted about, pitch me in weird and awkward ways. Like if you pitch me and you mention my kids' names, it's very hard not to sound creepy. I mean, I'd tweet about my kids by their names, and that's fine. It's okay that you know them. That's not uncomfortable for me. But if you're like, Anya's going to love this app, it's probably going to come off sounding sketchy. But she probably will love the app. Especially if Tokaboka makes it. But if On the other question about the App Store, the other developers here can probably address it better than I can, but I think it's scarier to be an iOS developer now than it's ever been, because how do you get noticed? Even if you get pressed, there's going to be 12 more apps getting pressed tomorrow, and there's a million apps to compete with in the App Store, just about literally. It's hard. App discovery is hard. I don't think the iOS App Store is very good at app discovery at all. And until and unless Apple improves it, I'm hopeful that in June we'll see some nice announcements from Apple. I think it's increasingly scary to try to launch a new app successfully.
Okay. Okay, we've got a question down here. And can the next person who wants to ask a question, okay, Griff, can you hover around this lovely gentleman over here?
Thanks, guys. I think today was really fantastic presentation, so thank you all. Jamie, I was really interested in the copy, and I had a question, but I'll come back because I didn't want to hog everything. But Amanda, I was in the Tokoboko stuff, and they're having kids that have downloaded every one of your apps, and much to it wasn't to my knowledge initially, because they discovered the in-app purchasing thing. Did you design that originally into the interface right from the outset? Or was it something that you did afterwards and said, right, this is how we can start to get in-app purchasing going and kids can actually go and do it without their parents needing them to assist them?
Well, we don't actually have in-app purchases.
You know the little, I meant the little icon.
We do have like links to the apps in the App Store, just to clear that up. I'm not actually sure because that was already in place when I started working at Tokoboka. But I think it was like fairly early on that they did that.
And have they found that's the biggest way that they get revenue from their apps? That referral in referral thing?
Yes, I mean, a lot of people, at least some people will find other apps through that.
And on this side?
Yeah, look, first of all, thanks to every panel member today. I think I've taken something away from every presentation, which is absolutely amazing. We're about to embark on a project, and we're looking at working with an app developer. And I was just wondering whether I can get a comment or a single most important criteria that each one of you feels we should be looking at in how we go about choosing an app developer. In your opinion, what's the most critical thing that we should be looking at? Maybe just a single word or a single sentence from across the panel, each one of you.
Reputation.
Compatibility. It's a cultural fit with the values of your organisation.
I think this talks to reputation, but you want to look at the work that they've done and make sure that you can work with them and that they listen to you.
I'd say a desire to create.
Back to reputation. Yes, look at their work. What I meant more specifically was talk to people they've worked with in the past and see what they have to say about the working relationship and whether or not they would suggest that you go through the same process.
What's been useful to me also is to talk to folks about apps that you love and apps that you don't love, and ask them what they would change in both, without necessarily specifying which ones you love and which ones you don't.
I'd probably back up the compatibility one.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Do we have another question? We've still got some T-shirts and magazines to give away. Yep, right up there. Sorry, you're right in the middle. I don't know who to... Actually, Griff, I'll get you to get this gentleman over here.
Thanks for an amazing, inspiring day, everyone. This question's for Amanda. I'm a designer, and obviously Tokoboka is visually very, very lush. As a developer, I thought you could shed a bit of light on how you work with the designer and how they sort of hand over, or maybe you yourself integrate all the graphical assets inside your very visual kind of apps.
Well, we usually work in teams with one developer, one artist, and one game designer. And the artist, well, does all the art, obviously. And it's like depends on what engine we use. Like we have used Cocos 2D a lot in the past, and then the artist can just save all the like R2 sprite sheets and give them to a developer. But if you use Unity, like the artist can be a bit more involved when and actually putting things in the scene, like on the screen themselves in Unity. So is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, just a quick thank you to all of you for your inspiring speeches today, much appreciated. My question is more towards the developers in the panel today. With Apple potentially now releasing 3 lines of products a year, iPhone, iPad and iPad mini, and 4 for iPod Touch, and multiple versions of the iOS operating system, how hard is it and what techniques do you guys use to decide what versions of iOS your upcoming applications should support and why?
At WWDC, Apple showed a graph of the uptake of people with new OS versions, and I think they usually get about an 80% uptake of the latest version, pretty soon, within 4 or 5 months or something like that after it comes out. So they basically say, just build with the latest version. All the latest cool stuff is good. We usually look to say, well, look, one version beyond the latest is fine. At the moment we're building for iOS 5 compatibility. And that's kind of self-serving though, right? Because building for iOS 5 isn't too bad. You can't use collection views, but there are ways around that. People have done backwards compatibility libraries for that. So I think that seems fair enough. There's some kind of counterpoints to that, which is people who get devices and never upgrade them, right? So you actually find that there are industries with people. Markets where people who might be your target consumer, maybe the older people who never update their things. Then you've got to say, well, look, it needs to be compatible with iOS 4, but you need to know your market like that. Otherwise, iOS 5.
Our policy, my company, we're a product company, so we get to set the bar for ourselves. Policies that we do, we'll ship for current released iOS, and then we'll support going forward, current, and then whatever the most recent in front of current was. And that's mostly based on, it's a paid app, it's going to be a paid app, so the people who don't upgrade their operating system probably aren't going to be paying for software anyway.
We actually, because with Camera Plus we held on to iOS 3 support for quite a while, and we used stats to determine when we should switch, and we looked at who was sharing photos, thinking that people sharing photos were the ones that we really cared, they're the ones who are really engaged. And when the iOS 3 bar, shrunk until you couldn't really see it, we flicked those guys.
I'll just add something that I know, talking about cross-platform as well. We support Android a lot further back than we do iOS, just because iOS does seem to be uptake a lot quicker. People will not, there are a lot of phones out there where on Android they'll just get what it was sold to them on and they'll still be using it, whereas with iOS, people definitely do upgrade a lot more often, so if you're thinking about cross-platform.
Okay, right here.
Hello. Question for Louise. What sort of payment models work best with schools, and who decides which apps get used in the schools?
Look, there's various different means. I've worked with some schools where a committee will get together and decide on a core group of just the most basic apps, and they'll say that is all we're having. I think it's a lot better to get to the grassroots and actually work with the teachers where these devices are going to be worked in the classroom, and I'm really happy with the process we're going through at the moment. I worked with a couple of teachers who were doing something similar in the States a couple of years ago, and essentially what I'm doing is I'm sitting down with that teacher and I'm looking at their curriculum and what they're trying to deliver, and then matching the apps to what they're trying to deliver in the classroom. Now, if I get a big enough cross-section of teachers and make sure that things aren't duplicated, I can start to see patterns. And another thing to look for is open-ended app, things that allow creativity. That's really important instead of things which are just, a drill and skill or those tap-tap games. We sort of don't look at those at all. We're really interested in something that a student can create and demonstrate skills beyond just using the device. So personalise it work with teachers individually and build up a database that way is what I would encourage.
Yeah, I've got a question for Simeon. By the way, it's kind of a bit of ironic in a way. I actually own Codea, but I had no idea it was developed in Australia, so I knew nothing about the story. But I really liked your idea of telling stories through apps, and I wondered if, it might be putting you on the spot, but I wonder if there is a few other apps that you can, sort of flesh out your example a bit more. I'm just wondering how to tell stories with apps, and maybe there are a few that you use that you like that you can tell the story of.
Well, for example, I think Minecraft is a good one that caught the public's attention, and it started out as a, as an alpha build that people could purchase for half price or whatever, and it sort of developed this niche following. And I think that story of creation in Minecraft was like so tied to the game that when it moved out to a wider audience, that initial tribe of people spread the story really well. And I think there are a lot of, especially in games, it happens a lot. So Cannabolt is another example where the sort of the indie story is embodied in the game, and it starts out as a free Flash game and then moves on to the App Store to great success. And you can look at other things like Robot Unicorn Attack, where they took the song and that became the story for the game. So I think you can sort of start to see them everywhere. But I tend to look to games because that's what I enjoy creating. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great, thank you.
Somebody who did a really nice job recently with their press outreach, and it's just developers, they don't have a real press person, to get their app story out there was Ridiculous Fishing, where they told the story in like a half dozen publications about how they had built a web version of that game, a Flash-based version of that game, and then took their time getting it to iOS, and in the meantime somebody else ripped off the game and released a sort of clone for the iPhone that did very well. And when they released their own actual version years later, it turned out to be hugely successful, so they felt vindicated and excited. But I only know that story because they told it over and over again in the press, which is, it's a good way to get the word out.
And on this side?
Yeah, so a broad question. If you've got a crazy idea that you're wanting to develop, how do you sort of validate that it's more than just your crazy idea, it's actually something that should be taken to market?
Say build a prototype, get it out there. Let people use it, see if there's a market for it. Iterate, do it again.
Read Eric Ries's book.
Make it up as you go and then pray.
What I wanted to add to that was, if you have an idea and, just like the other guy said, try to get it out there, but, try something simple first, simplify the idea, boil it down to its core, prototype it, get it out there, and see what traction you get in the market. If the market's responding, it's great, then, you can add features, and keep going with it.
This isn't always true, but a lot of people think of development as a form of artistry. And I know that my favorite artists, whether it's writers or singers or whatever else, and this is true especially for children's artists, which is what made me think of it, is they have a strategy of, I'm going to make something that I like, and then hopefully other people will like it. So maybe you're going to build an app that is not for you. Like I built a diet tracking app, even though I didn't want to track my food. I would much rather just eat. But if you can find something to build that you are genuinely interested in, I would just build something that you're genuinely interested in. Having the passion about it and being an actual user of your app. I'm not talking dog food eating as much as I'm talking just somebody who wants this thing that you're building means that there's an audience for it because it's you.
Combining those two, your point and Lee's point, I think that if you have an idea that is something you want to build, there's that idea of minimum viable product, and I think it's become a bit of a cliche, but it's true. You want to build the simplest version of the thing that you're trying to create, and then put that out there, see how well it does, and add to it over time, rather than sit around trying to bake something forever.
I think there's a counterpoint to that, is that in the App Store, people like things that are polished. They like things that are finished. And if you can, so I think the idea of minimum viable product is higher. It's a higher minimum on the App Store than it is perhaps in the web, right? You need to actually come out with something that people are going to really love. So my friend Magic Dave, who just released the Blockheads, he worked on that for 18 months. 18 months he went through that, and how he kind of tested that was to talk about it and to release sort of progress notes and release screenshots, and I think a couple of videos of what he was doing so that he could see then how people responded. And when he came out with that, and he's released a couple of bug fix releases, but it was super polished when he came out with it, and it was a full thing. And I think that takes a lot of guts, because it's really hard, and you start to doubt yourself after a couple of months in. But you can perhaps find alternate ways without actually releasing too soon of testing to make sure that your idea is not crazy.
That's interesting. I was thinking minimum in terms of features, not in terms of polish. Yeah. So if you're right, the bar is way higher on the App Store. What do you think of the idea? Now I'm asking questions. Give me a shirt. What do you think of the idea of spending as little time on features as you can and then polishing the hell out of every one of them?
I think few features has kind of been a defining feature of iPhone apps, right? Like an app is often the best apps are apps that are really simple, and I think it can really depend upon where you are. You've got. I think I absolutely agree with that. I think there's a real danger of overstuffing an app with features. There's definitely a danger if you launch an app with a lot of features that you're not sure how to describe it, right? If you can't describe an app in one sentence because it just does too much stuff, then I think that hampers your message. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I will take a very well-polished one-feature app over a terribly polished app that does everything, because I already have Photoshop.
Right.
Cheap shot.
I might add just quickly a crazy idea that's really focused, I think, and keeping sort of in mind this core of whatever it is that you're actually trying to accomplish, and staying true to that throughout the process, and always sort of connecting to that and remembering what those key use cases were and what the problem that you're trying to solve actually is. Because sometimes when we deviate from that and come up with additional examples, we kind of lose that focus and that vision, and that kind of makes things tougher along the way, because we can't prioritize for everything, every use case, every feature. So the more we add, the more other things suffer. So I would emphasize focus, I think.
It's interesting, if I could just add to that, I've been catching up with a friend who's actually developing an app, and every time I meet him, he's like, oh, I'm nearly finished, but I actually just thought of this feature and I'm going to add it on. And the problem is he adds that on, and then that adds complexity, and then there are more bugs, and then you just keep going round and round and round in circles. And I've been saying to him, just cut it off, like just give yourself a date and just get something out to the market, because when it actually goes out to the market, people will tell you what they want, and you'll actually get a better feel for what actually works and what doesn't. And in the meantime, while you're still iterating and not putting it out to market, someone else is actually going to come out with a much simpler version of what you're actually waiting to finish, and they're going to kind of absolutely take the wind out of your launch, and you might actually lose your whole market. So I think, I couldn't agree more with everyone on the panel that really focus on what are the key features and the need. So it all comes back to the need and the problem that you're trying to meet. Meet that, and then you can add the pizzazz and the jazz and the extra features later, once you've actually received feedback from the people that are using it.
And remember, it's pizzazz first and then jazz.
I'm going to keep this rolling. The product I'm working on right now, not shipped yet, but one of the first things we did sort of as a joke, just for the fun of it, was trying to conceptualize what it is that is the core of the product. We made a movie poster with the slogan and everything. And it was a joke at the time, but as the months have gone by through development and the design process, that slogan and the spirit that went into that has been very much our guiding light of keeping us focused on what it is this thing was supposed to do.
While you guys done now, my question actually went through three or four iterations since you started that last answer round, but it's kind of related. It's because we're a commercial developer, but we have a lot of indie developers in our team as well, and it goes to a lot of indie developers in the room today. When we do a commercial development, we tend to pump it out in about 3-4 months because it's its UX and its design, the wireframes, and it's all a production line. Whereas the indie guys, because they're doing work part-time and trying to cobble things together, tend to take a year, 18 months to get something out. Which is better, do you think? Would you, as an indie developer, try to get a crowd-funded, try to get investment in, to get the product out quickly, within under 6 months, for example, or bootstrap it amongst 2, 3, 4 times what you should normally take?
Because that's, to me at least, a philosophical question. I guess there's no right answer except for mine, which is, my instinct is, in those situations, I have always been inclined to avoid bringing in extra people who can tell me what to do before there's a product that's a reality, that's tangible and exists. So my instinct is always to try to avoid investors and try to avoid even crowdfunding, because they're your investors. If it's something like software development, because I want to build the app that's in my head, that's my vision, and I want to get that out there without being beholden to anyone else other than the people who are working on it with me.
Sweet. Okay, it's fine.
I told you I was right. Nobody disagrees.
I think you're right. I think there's the two paths you can take. One is going the Valley method of going after funding, which some people very much like to do. The other way to do it, and the way that I prefer, is if you have an idea that you believe in, you're going to be willing to work your nighttime hours to get it done. You're going to want to work with your friends, and you're going to build a team that is made up of the people that you actually want to work with, not just the people that you can afford to work with. It has a big impact on the thing that you ship.
Okay, I'm going to talk now. Sorry. I've got a question for Jamie.
Hello.
Yes.
Where's it
thanks
coming
for
from?
your talk about copy. I'm right here.
Oh, hello.
I thought it was quite interesting that you said that how copy can basically add personality to your app, and or at least change the way that users interact with your app or your website or whatever, like the Twitter example. How do you go about, if you already have an existing app and you want to basically add some pizzazz to it, so you want to make it a bit more interesting and less bland.
Yeah.
How do you go down that path? And then how do you know if you've made the correct adjustments? Like how do you test this? And
if it's an update you're going to do and you're going to sweep your app for copy specifically, use my little template there, address every bit of copy with it. You want to ask like what you're doing, what you're trying to serve, and make sure it's still functional, that it's a useful bit of text. But, the whole thing I did about the personality of the app, know what your product personality is, and then make sure every touch point with a human ties back to that somehow. And that's what you do. I would do a complete update that is 100% copy.
And then how would you measure the results? Like what sort of testing can you do or whatever to figure out? Like, do you just wait to hear from people and people say, hey, what are you doing? This sucks.
Yeah, you'll hear. You'll hear in your feedback most often. So yeah.
Okay.
I think if you're lucky enough to be able to put analytics in the app, depending on what it is that you actually want to track. So think about the different conversions that might happen along the user journey within the app, and if you can put analytics in, then that's a great way to actually be able to measure the changes that you make in the app and whether they've worked or whether they haven't.
Also, I think if you're doing something particularly special, you just look out for people tweeting screenshots of it and and enjoying it. If they're sharing an error message in your app, then you're obviously got too many bugs.
Yeah. I've seen the screenshot of the updates when someone starts doing like really clever updates to their, like the Yelp example that you showed earlier. That suddenly becomes huge viral marketing. People send it all over the place.
It's interesting, and you've engaged people. You make them laugh, or you make them sad, or you make them scared, but you make them feel something. I mean, it's an app, but you want people to feel something when they use it, and yeah, you can do that with words.
Mm-hmm.
I would also add that no one's release notes are better than Lauren Brichter's for Letterpress.
I can't believe this is the first mention of Letterpress I've heard today.
There was a tweet about it earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Hey guys, on the topic of Letterpress, is there any particular apps that you guys look to for inspiration? Like for me, Paper by 53 sort of last year stood head and shoulders above almost everything else there, and I'm just wondering, is there anything particularly of late that you guys have seen that makes you think, wow?
Cleveland Museum of Art just opened a gallery in January called Gallery One that is probably taken what we did at Mona to another level and is really challenging us. It's only available. I think it's actually available on iPad, so you can download it. But it actually, in terms of an on-site experience, it's really it should be quite amazing. Sadly, haven't been there myself.
I've got to say, I think Google has actually done a great job in its latest round of app releases. I think they've streamlined their brand brilliantly across all of their different app products. I think they've added, I think they came out with apps that just focus on the really core features, and they've done those features really, really nicely with, little bits of I guess, delight kind of hidden in there all over the place. And they give you really great little tips. So as soon as you open the app, and I opened one last night and I was like, oh wow, that's just so fantastic. They've updated it and they've actually told me what they've updated and how I can get more out of it since the last time I used it. So I think they've actually done a great job over the past 12 months or so.
The two that came to mind for me were Mailbox, which I like as a sort of genre of apps that are willing to be extremely opinionated, because I know like Dave says that Mailbox does not work. I'm not to speak for Dave, but I talk to him all the time, but Mailbox doesn't work for you. It's not your thing. But
I said no such.
Jamie and I love it. Jamie said it changed her life. That's what she told me before. And but it doesn't work for everybody, but it works for us. And I like that kind of thing of having a strong opinion. And the other app that I was thinking about is, and I'll disclose that these folks have sponsored my podcast in the past, but Panic's status board really I thought was a very clever way to get you into the app. Because you mentioned Google and how their apps try to get you tooltips and stuff ahead of time, and Apple does its weird sort of tooltip overlay in iPhoto and GarageBand, and I feel like that's giving up. When you go to the tooltip overlay, it's like, well, we know you're not going to be able to puzzle all this out, and there's too many things to touch, so here's a cheat sheet. It works, but it feels very un-Apple-like to me. But with Status Board, it's got this very ridiculously fun intro where it's like a IKEA-style manual. Does IKEA translate here? Yep. Okay, an IKEA-style instruction manual when you first open the app, and there's like Muzak playing in the background to entertain you as you read it, and it's, I don't know, I think that thinking about that level of polish to make the first run experience, and you only see it the one time to make it that polished, I thought was very, very clever.
Mine, I was gonna mention Mailbox, actually. Not, no, I don't use it, and I probably never will, but it's very well designed. The app that I will mention is called, I gotta back out to the name of it, Figure from Propellerhead. And you probably can't see my screen. It's a music app. Well, look really closely. It's a music app kind of made for people who would like to make music but have no idea how that's done. And what I like about it is it's a very minimalist design. It's very much an immersive design, but it's done in such a way that you don't need to understand how music works to make something that sounds interesting. So with just hitting a few things at random, I'm going to see if this works. And you can play. Did that come out at all? Okay. Airplane random keys. You can make something that is at least, I don't know, danceable while you're standing at your cubicle or on your treadmill desk. I think that's a really cool step forward. A lot of thought went into that.
I'd like to mention Procreate by Savage Interactive. It's also made in Australia, but they've put an amount of polish in their app that sort of made me reconsider my own apps. They tended to rewrite a lot of Apple's UIKit controls because they just were pretty ugly, but they did it in such a way that they made them really special, and I think that app's a really good example of both a really usable painting app and a super polished app that just has completely taken their own styling of UIKit and implementation. So that's a really good one.
So I've got one which I think is incredible, and it has actually changed my life too. So it's for prototyping, so it's briefs, right? And it's fantastic. So I think there's probably lots of people out in the room here that you could test that crazy idea with briefs. You can build something and it looks and feels like an app. It's got transitions and you can set up your whole flows and everything, and it feels pretty good. And so anyone could figure out how to build something in Briefs. Like, you can put cool stuff together. It's really buggy and there's some weird UX and stuff, but it's an incredible app for prototyping. So I check out Briefs if you're into that.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I've got a question to Amanda from Tokaboka. You showed us a very good example how you work with users. I'm here. So you obviously work a lot with your users, but your clients are actually parents, right? So who buy your apps. So how do you actually work with them? How do you communicate with them? Or what do you have forums? Do you have cross promotions in your apps or Facebook pages? Tell us just a bit about that.
Yes, we have a Facebook page where we post trailers and stuff like that, and we also have cross promotion in our apps. So yes, what we basically try to do is like make a brand that parents can trust, like with having no in-app purchases and ads and stuff like that, so that they know that they can trust Tokaboka and that their kids will like it, and then they will continue to buy our new apps, like hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah. In this trade-off between getting an app out quickly and with minimal features and just getting it out to get feedback, how realistic of a concern is it that other people might then copy the app and then you've got this plethora of newly made competition? If you're like a crazy new idea, or you're the first one, or you're wondering if you're creating a new genre, or you're coming up with a really original idea, and especially if you're somebody working at home as an indie with not a lot of resources and you're working part-time, and then, you know, getting this out little bit by little bit. I've been working, so you might have more of an experience of that with the Macworld reviewing. You know, you review one, and then how soon after are these tons of other same concepts? So how can somebody who comes out first stay ahead?
It's a really good question. I think that my answer is, in general, that you can't worry about it. The only thing that you have control of is yours. And it's inevitable. If yours is great, people are going to want to emulate it. And if yours is only, if you're building something that so far is only potential but is currently not good, people are also going to try to build a better version. But I think I mean, it's easy for me to say as the guy who just writes about them, but I think as the developer of the app, it's your job to focus on, I want to make my app the best it can be. And, you know, I think, you know, if somebody looks at Mailbox, I think now there are an increasing number of third-party email clients on the App Store. But if they're trying to be another Mailbox, they don't know how Mailbox got to all of its decisions. So it's like if you try to build a car by only looking at the outside, it's probably not going to go. So I think that to me, I think it's okay, because at some point your app's going to be out there, whether it's in a finished state or a less than finished state, and people are going to be able to try to knock it off. And I think the thing to focus on is how can I make my own app that I'm creating the best possible one it can be. And I'll tell you, the truth is, if there's a great genre-defining version of an app, whatever it is, and then other folks come to us and say, hey, we've got a thing that's just like Mailbox, only better. It's right, Mailbox on steroids. It's a lot of times we don't even bother. If there's already a great one, it's nice that you have one, but until I hear from everybody else that it's great, it may not be worth my time, because there's already a great one. So if you're great, then don't worry about everybody else.
There's a good chance that if your app, if your product is that easy to copy in a very short period of time, you didn't really have a license to, you didn't have a monopoly on that anyway. It was destined to be short-lived. You have to think about what is your real, what is the magic that you offer? What is the thing that you can do that somebody else can't? And I'm willing to bet that it's probably not the software itself. It's either your ideas or your approach to things or your team that is going to make the difference, not the bits and bytes that get released on the App Store.
And when we talk about minimum viable product, it's also about looking at the features that differentiate your app from another app that might actually be similar, or that you might be concerned will be coming out soon. So that's a prioritization tool, is just think about what's actually going to make you different or better than anyone else who might copy you going forward.
We could take a look at Samsung to see how this plays out. Yeah. I mean, that sounds like a joke. I'm being serious. Apple was copied, and how well are those things really working out. Samsung or whomever can copy what Apple's doing on the phone with the hardware or the software, but they can only copy what's been done. They're not copying the parts of the process that got Apple there. So they can't, if Apple were to disappear tomorrow, things are going to stagnate, or at least they're not going to be what they could have been.
I would also say you got to avoid getting into a feature race. You mentioned before about the other museum that's got another app, and my guess is that the folks you work with aren't saying, let's quick copy everything that they've done. It's, what can we do to make our app better? What can we learn here? But if you get stuck in maybe there's going to be a new crop of RSS readers, is my guess, with Google Reader shutting down. And if everybody tries to say, oh, well, they've got syncing with 17 different services, so we need all 17 different services, I think that's the wrong way to approach the problem. To me, the right way to approach the problem is to say, which things are our users responding to positively? Which things do they like? I know I fall back on my own development experience, which was with this diet tracking startup called The Daily Plate, where when we launched it, we were really proud of it and people really liked it. And this was a web app and it was the early 2000s. But folks said to us, hey, every day I'm logging the same thing. I'm logging a slice of bread times 2, and I'm logging peanut butter, and I'm logging jelly for Vegemite. And then I have to log each of those things individually each day. But I have a peanut butter sandwich 4 days a week, so let me group those things into a meal. And of course, that's a totally obvious feature and it makes a ton of sense. We didn't have it. But when you can, instead of looking at what our competitors are doing, because we very intentionally didn't look at the other diet tracking websites, we were just looking, for us, it was on forums and on blog comments, what our own users were saying and what their feedback was, and letting them help us not drive the product, but figure out where our flaws were and what was working well. So do that instead of trying to compare to what your competitors are doing.
Thank you.
We'll go this side.
Thank you all once again. I really felt they were incredibly enjoyable and thought-provoking talks. So I have one question that's kind of aimed at those of you who've done some development, I guess, and that is that it seems that app success right now on the App Store is tied heavily to user happiness. So the fact that because of ratings and reviews being very important, and also just because word of mouth, I think, being very important for sales of apps. So it seems to me one of the issues with the App Store right now is the disconnect and the fact that there isn't an easy way to communicate with users or let them know if there's a problem with your app that you fix but it's in review with Apple, or to respond to reviews, this kind of thing. So I'm really interested to know if this is something you've encountered or thought about, and maybe any solutions you have to that problem.
You said that an app's success is tied to user happiness?
Yeah, I think so.
You almost say that like it's a bad thing.
No, I think it's a great thing. What I think is difficult about it is just that if you have a user who is unhappy for whatever reason, it's sometimes hard to let them know that you have a solution to it and you've worked on a fix, but it's waiting in review with Apple. Or someone asks you a question, like you can't respond to user reviews, this kind of thing.
Right.
So I think there's a trick there that it's communication is difficult with these users.
I think you need to, there's a couple things you can do. Obviously have a website, obviously have something behind that support link, have a Twitter account, communicate in every way that you can possibly communicate. Even if that means coming down to having an in-app like web view that you can use to talk to users. Do not use push notifications to tell people about these things. That's awful. But the best thing that I'd recommend is to set a precedent of when something breaks, constant releases. There's always something new. There's always a new version coming out. Then there's no question about, is this being worked on, because the users are seeing a steady stream of updates.
We've previously looked at reviews when you've had negative reviews of people saying something's not working, something's crashing. And I just Google those people because often they use the same username in lots of different places.
I have done that once or twice, but I do feel it's a little creepy.
Yeah, it's terribly creepy, but I'm still Facebook friends with most of those people.
Yeah, it's Twitter username @gmail.com. Yeah.
That's very much in line with what I was thinking. Is like, because you did say a user is upset about something, and there's sort of an operative there as a user, and it's really paying attention to the volume of users complaining about certain things, and not being reactive to one or two things.
When you contact those people, do you tell them that you just Googled their name?
Pretty much, yeah. I always introduce myself.
Because if you just open with, I saw your complaint and I'd like to talk about it, that's creepy.
I'll definitely do that in the future.
I think
what's in your app that let you do that?
Also, the other thing you can do is sometimes you might, be trying to meet a certain release schedule, and you might have a lot that you're trying to get in, and only some of it can actually get in before you need to submit. So what we sometimes do is, if we're actually working on a feature that we know people, or a bug that we know people are complaining about, but it's not quite ready yet, we'll actually put that in the release notes and say, hey, we know you actually want this. It's nearly ready. It's coming soon, just so that people know we've actually heard. So even if you haven't addressed something, still let them know that you're listening to their feedback. Because I think if people know that you're listening and that you care, that's sometimes enough, and we'll get them by.
I love that advice. And if you're going to Alt WWDC in June, I did a talk with several of these people around in Dublin last month on that sort of thing, on learning, on basically how to handle your mistakes, and over-communicating in the ways that you can is huge. Even if you can't fix the thing right away, if you acknowledge, yeah, it's broken and we're going to work on it, that buys you a lot of time.
We found with Codea, one user left a review saying, hey guys, don't buy this. Apple's going to shut this app down in 2 weeks and it's going to be gone from the App Store. I don't know why they said that, but it was a review. And I felt bad about it, but then I realized, given that there's nothing I can do, I just ignored it, and the problem went away because the app was good enough to stand on its own despite the review. But in the end, I did put in a news feed in the app where I could relay information to people who had it and hope that they would share it. So I think that was probably one of the good moves I made with Codea, was to have just a news feed that could be updated via the web.
Okay, I think we've only got time for one more question, so just at the back here.
Hi, yeah. Ooh, wow. I really enjoyed today. It was really great. And I was wondering, I had a question, but I wanted to ask a question quickly to know who I could sort of target this question at. Have any of you shipped a product, like an app or a website or whatever? Have you ever shipped anything pretty much totally independently? I mean, maybe you might have hired somebody to do the icon or something, but have any of you actually done it without a business partner or anything like that?
Back in the web days, yes.
Right. Okay. The thing is that since I've been hanging around here, I've been meeting a lot of people who have business partners. Obviously, most of you, I think, now you work in companies, or you always have somebody that you've been working with. And I was wondering, how valuable do you think that is to have somebody alongside you, and likewise, how much do you think maybe you lack or maybe you gain without having that person when you're working on something? Because obviously we were talking earlier about features, and somebody mentioned how they've got a friend of theirs who keeps adding features and never ships. Is having that kind of extra business partner or something there useful to make you get stuff done, or do they get in the way? Does that hinder you? Which is better?
I was about to ask if anybody could think of an example of, who could do something great all by themselves? Then I realized the answer is Lauren Brinkman.
Lauren Brinkman.
Yeah, exactly.
Other than him.
Other than him, it's Brent Simmons, right?
Historically.
So I actually think that having someone there with you is so important. It's so hard. No matter how well you do, and your app can be awesome and people love it, it's still just incredibly hard. But I'm sure all of us have days where you go, oh my God, it's just what are we doing? It's just not working, and it's just really, really hard because there's so many things that can happen, and it's every day, and you're working with people and technology, and it's hard. So you need someone there who can be with you and help you get through that. It's psychological, moral support more than anything. It's great to do the work, but just that journey is hard. So you need someone to go with on that together. I think that's really important. So. There are some people like Lauren who can just do it all, but my God, he's...
I hate him.
Right, yeah, we all do. So.
You can absolutely have a single parent and raise great kids, but you can, when you have two or more parents involved, in my strain metaphor, when you have a whole team of parents raising that app kid,
it takes a village.
But no, having somebody to bounce ideas off, having somebody who you can vent to, and having somebody who can listen to your idea and say, that is so great, and you should also do this, to me seems like almost all of the time a no-brainer. But I think the question is, do you hate other people? I don't mean that as a joke. Like, I mean, if you, there are kids who you see, like I volunteer in my kids' classroom, and there's kids when it's group time and they just hate it. They do not want to work with other people. If you don't want to work with other people, then don't. But if you don't have any specific aversion to it other than, am I going to lose control? Am I going to be held back? I think that if you don't hate working with other people, to me, it's very rare to find it not beneficial to have somebody who, if somebody you're willing to work with, who you trust and can rely on, who can also be there in the trenches with you, makes it a lot easier.
Or if you're going to work, it starts the beta early.
Try
that again. Go ahead.
I think a lot of it comes down to personality. If you want to do it by yourself and you've got the drive to do it, you can do a really good job of it, and you have a clear vision of what that needs to be. But that's a really difficult thing to do, and that's why not very many people actually do it, because you do need someone to bounce those ideas off. But sometimes the person you're bouncing the ideas off can be detrimental. So, you know, it's a difficult one. But if you can do it by yourself, do it. Like if that's what you want to do and it's your love, and you don't want to listen to someone else tell you that that's a bad idea, because they will at some point. Yeah, go for it.
We've got one final question. Sorry, mate. Sorry, we've got one final question over here.
G'day. Lex, earlier you spoke about these apps that go on to define a genre, you know, your mailboxes, your papers, Procreates. Do you see an app or a category, a subsection of people that are currently don't have an app that sort of defines their genre? Is there any area where you'd like to see app developers do a better job?
No pressure.
I open the question to the group.
I don't know that I have one offhand, but let me look at my screen. Wow, that's a lot of Twitter notifications. Yeah, no, Twitter apps I think are good. I think we've reached peak Twitter app. I think we've reached peak photo manipulation in terms of filters. I think that one's pretty well done. Maps, I think we also are good with. You know, I don't know that I have an answer to you that's of any use. To me, the thing that I want is not really a genre. It might just be a Lex Friedman need, but I want there are several apps that claim to do this and none of them work. I was watching a movie in my hotel room a day or two ago and I couldn't figure out what it was called for a while. I had to eventually Google character names and lines of dialogue to find it, but I want a Shazam for TV and movies that genuinely works, and none of them did. It was ATM and it's a terrible movie. I watched it all. It's terrible. But no, it's a really good question, and I think if I had it, I wouldn't tell you because I would just go hire somebody and build it.
Yeah,
no, I would
keep in mind this answer
right
could be someone's origin story.
Right.
I was just thinking about like healthcare, for example, or I mean, here in Australia, there's mining, which is quite big, and construction. You know, those sorts of like areas where we, as you know, kind of technical, you know, technological people inclined, don't necessarily see into that world as much.
You know, the one thing that I think it's going to be very hard to own, and Google right now is trying to own it on iOS, and it's the sweet spot between Siri kind of stuff and Passport kind of stuff, but also contextual awareness that I don't have to provide. You know, the thing that Google now offers folks, especially on Android, more so than in the Google app, is I don't have to feed stuff into it manually. It's reading all of my email, and it's looking at where I am and where I work and where I live. And people are going to get comfortable with it. I mean, most Android users, I would venture, already are. So, you know, and I don't think it's going to be easy for a third-party iOS app developer to use it, but there is something there for that sort of intelligent, contextually aware assistant that can know everything that you're doing and volunteer information before you ask for it. I think there's opportunity there, but I think it's because of the iOS way, it's going to be hard for a third-party app to get to.
Okay.
I think you kind of touched on how a lot of iPhone apps or how a lot of apps are kind of born is that someone's got some domain knowledge and they're aware that there's not any great apps for mining. Right? I think that's how a lot of apps actually come about. So what we're actually looking for is people who are already in those domains. They will be aware that those are unserved. You know, a miner who's also a software developer but gone to mining because there's better money. Yeah. Right? Like, you know, if they then say, well, look, there's an amazing opportunity here to build software for these things. I think that's how a lot of apps, especially apps in niches, are born. So I think those holes get plugged.
Fair enough. Look, I think we do have to wrap it up there. We literally get kicked out of this place in 5 minutes. So I do want to say a massive thank you to all of our wonderful speakers here today.